each month I've been discussing one paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, and we're now halfway through. Last time we did paragraph 10, and this time we're doing paragraph 11. That's out of a total 20 paragraphs. 10 and 11 are two paragraphs in which Bhagavan is talking about vasanas. So these are, and how to overcome vasanas. So these are very important, two very important paragraphs. According to Bhagavan, the easiest thing of all is to know ourselves. There's nothing easier than to know ourselves. But most of us, when we try to put his teachings into practice, when we try to turn our attention within to investigate ourselves, and when we try to surrender ourselves, it seems to be very difficult. The reason for that is, it is not actually difficult. There's no difficulty at all, either in surrendering ourselves or in investigating ourselves. They seem to be difficult because of our lack of willingness. That is, we have the fact that we're all sitting here means we've all got some interest in this subject. We've all got some curiosity to know who am I. But our liking to know who am I is not yet sufficient. Because in order to experience ourselves as we actually are, there's a small price to pay. We have to give up everything else. But though it seems to us a lot, giving up ego and giving up all the other things that we hold dear, Bhagavan said it's like being asked to sacrifice a quarter paisa. That's a tiny coin in those days, quarter paisa, in return for all the wealth in the world. We're reluctant to let go of this quarter paisa, even though in exchange we can get all the wealth in the world. That is, what we need to give up are transient and ephemeral things. Even the person we see, this whole world is ephemeral. The person we seem to be is ephemeral. The ego that experiences this person as I is also ephemeral, but it appears and it disappears. So none of these things are permanent, so none of them are real. They come and they go. They seem to us very valuable because we believe that we get happiness from things outside us. But according to Bhagavan, there's no happiness at all in anything outside us. Happiness is our real nature. As soon as we rise as ego and thereby limit ourselves as a body, as a person, we are separating ourselves from the infinite happiness that we actually are. So as ego, we're always dissatisfied. Because of our dissatisfaction, we're constantly seeking satisfaction, we're seeking happiness. And because now we take ourselves to be a body. As a body, we're dependent on certain things. We require air to breathe, we require water to drink, we require food, we require clothing, we require shelter, so many needs we have. So when our needs are satisfied, temporarily, the desire for those things is temporarily satisfied, so we feel that the agitation in our mind caused by that desire temporarily subsides. To the extent that our mind subsides, to that extent do we experience the happiness that is already within us. So if we have desire for something, like we're very hungry, and we're given a nice meal, we feel happy eating that meal. That meal gives us satisfaction. That happiness or satisfaction that we feel is not there in the food. It's from within us. It's when the desire for that food is satisfied, temporarily we experience satisfaction. But because we experience pleasure when our desires are fulfilled, or when we avoid things that we dislike, we think our happiness is caused by these external things, so our mind is constantly going outward seeking external things. This inclination of our mind to go outwards, to seek things other than itself, to seek phenomena, are what are called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya is a word that in this context means phenomena of any kind whatsoever, whether the seemingly physical phenomena of the world or the thoughts, feelings, anything that appears and disappears. That reminds me, I should silence mine. That's okay. Anything that appears and disappears is something other than ourselves, because we are there as the one who is aware of its appearance and disappearance. Even the ego that appears and disappears is other than ourselves, because we exist in the absence of the ego in sleep. So everything everything other than that is, ego rises and it projects all these phenomena. The ego is the subject, the phenomena are the objects. The phenomena are what are called in this context, that is the meaning of the word Vishaya, and Vasana means propensity, inclination, liking, desire. So all our desires to be aware of things other than ourselves are what are called Vishaya vasanas. So these are the problems. It's because of our Vishaya vasanas that it seems to be difficult for us to turn within. Because of our Vishaya vasanas, we are not willing to let go of everything else. And until we let go of everything else, we cannot let go of ego. Because ego is the subject that is aware of other things. So long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, we are experiencing ourselves not as we really are, but as ego. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to cease being aware of ourselves as ego. And in order to cease being aware of ourselves as ego, we need to cease being aware of everything else. So we have to be willing to let go of everything. But the fact that we're all here, we still haven't merged back into the source from which we arose, means that we are not yet sufficiently willing to let go. So that is what Bhagavan is talking about in this 10th and 11th paragraph. How to gain that willingness to let go. How to give up desires for everything else and cultivate the love to be aware of ourself alone. To be satisfied with just our mere self-awareness. In the previous paragraph, he said, though Vishaya vasanas rise like waves of the ocean, seemingly without limit, and he says, Tondru Totu Varakindra Vishaya Vasana. That means Vishaya vasanas that come from time immemorial, though they rise like without limit, like the waves of the ocean, they will all be destroyed when Swarupa Dhyana means self-attentiveness. That's another term for self-investigation, Atma-vichara. When Swarupa Dhyana increases and increases, all these Vishaya vasanas will be destroyed. And then in the next sentence he says, without giving room even to a doubting thought, is it possible to destroy so many vasanas and just to be as I am? It is necessary to cling tenaciously to Swarupa Dhyana, to the self-attentiveness. He says it the words he uses in Tamil are very, very strong there. Swarupa Dhyana te vida pidiyai pidika vendam. That means it is necessary to cling. Vida pidiyai means clinging without leaving in such a manner. It's an adverb describing the clinging. It's necessary to cling so firmly, so tenaciously to Swarupa Dhyana or self-attentiveness. And then he says, however great a sinner one may be, without lamenting, oh, I'm a sinner, how can I be saved? If one clings, if one gives up even that thought and clings firmly to self-attentiveness, one will certainly be saved. The term he uses, urupaduvan, that one will be reformed. And he says, nityamai, certainly. So that's the previous paragraph. This paragraph is a continuation of that. Whereas in the previous paragraph he was referring to self-investigation as swarupa dhyana. Swarupa dhyana literally means meditation or contemplation on one's own form, one's own real nature. In other words, attending only to oneself. Here he uses the term vichara instead. In fact, he used the term vicharana, which is another form of vichara. It's an alternative form of the Sanskrit word vichara. In Tamil it becomes vicharane. So in the first sentence of this paragraph, he says, Manatin kan eduvarayil vishayavasanaigal irukindranavo aduvarayil nana ennum vicharanayam vendum. That means as long as Vishaya vasanas exist within the mind, so long the investigation, who am I, is necessary. That is, we haven't reached the end of the journey until all our Vishaya vasanas have been destroyed. But as an ego, we cannot entirely destroy all our Vishaya vasanas, because ego is the root of all Vishaya. Whose desires are they? Whose likes and dislikes are they? They're mine. That I, but has these likes and dislikes, but the I whose desires they are, is ego. And so long as ego is there, ego will always have desire. It's the very nature of the ego to have desire. In verse 25 of Uludunaptu, Bhagavan says about ego, urupatri undu, urupatri nikam. That is, grasping form, it rises. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. Leaving one form, it grasps another form. But if investigated, it takes flight. Such is the nature of this formless phantom called ego. So the ego comes into existence by grasping. It itself is formless, but all phenomena are forms. Form is another term for phenomena. So it's only by clinging to phenomena, by being aware of things other than itself, that ego seems to exist. If ego looks at itself, it disappears. That's why he says, Tedinalotum pidikum. If sought, it takes flight. That means if it turns its attention back to itself, tries to see itself alone, if it tries to cling to itself, because it has no form, when it tries to cling to itself, it will dissolve back into its source. But by turning its attention outwards, it is thereby clinging to forms. Clinging there means, he says ego is a formless phantom, so it doesn't have hands or arms to cling to anything. Clinging to things, what he means is holding them in our awareness, attending to them. So because the ego comes into existence and sustains its existence by clinging is the very nature of ego. So long as ego is there, there will be desires. And the seeds of these desires in seed forms are what are called Vishaya vasanas. So we can, by the practice of self-investigation, or by other means, by bhakti and such other means, we can weaken our Vishaya vasanas. We cannot destroy them entirely until we destroy their root, ego. And the only means to destroy ego is self-investigation, because ego is nothing but a wrong awareness of ourself, an awareness of ourself as something other than what we actually are. Now I'm aware of myself as Michael. I'm sitting here, and this body, I'm talking, thoughts are going through my mind. It's all I'm limited within as Bhagavan says, within the extent of the body, I'm now limited. That's my experience. I'm aware of myself as this body. This is a wrong awareness of myself. This is not what I actually am. So long as I'm aware of myself as I am Michael, I cannot be aware of myself as I actually am. So what is that spurious self-awareness, but is always aware of itself as I am this body, I am this person? That is ego. So in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we have to give up ego. But in order to give up ego, we first have to a very great extent, give up our Vishaya vasanas, give up our desires, our clinging, our attachment. Because so long as the clinging and attachment is there, we're not willing to let go of other things. So long, until we're willing to let go of other things, we won't be willing to let go of ego. Because ego is what is clinging to other things. So long as there, even the least trace of any Vishaya vasanas remaining, in other words, so long as our attention is going outwards, so long it is necessary to persevere in this investigation, who am I? So long it's necessary to cling firmly to Swarupa Dhyana, as he called it in the previous paragraph, self-attentiveness. That is, trying to be, we're always self-aware, but we're not always, but though we're always self-aware, we generally neglect our self-awareness because there are so many other interesting things in this world to know about. So our attention is constantly on other things. We overlook the self-awareness. Our self-awareness is like a screen in a cinema. It's always there. It's the constant background. But we don't go to a cinema to sit and look at a screen. We go there to watch an interesting movie. And because we're so interested in the movie that's going on, we overlook the screen. It's almost as we know the screen is always there, but it's almost as if it wasn't there. Because for us, our attention is wholly on the pictures, on the story that's going on. Likewise, though the self-awareness, the fundamental awareness I am, that is there as the background of all our experience. We cannot be aware of anything else without being aware of ourselves. And even when we're aware of nothing else, as in dream, we're still aware of ourselves. So that is the constant background. But in waking and dream, though we're self-aware, we are negligently self-aware. Instead of being negligently self-aware, we have to become attentively self-aware. That being attentively self-aware is what Bhagavan calls Swarupa Dhyana or Atma-vichara or the investigation, who am I? So this is necessary so long as the vasanas, even the slightest trace of vasanas remain. Then in the second sentence, he explains to us how we are to put this into practice. Ninivugal tondra apodu kapode abegal ellam uppatistana tileye vicharanayal nasipika vendum. That means as and when thoughts appear. Ninival tondra means when thoughts appear, when they appear. It's that repetition of a verb. It's the equivalent of as and when. As and when thoughts appear. Apode kapode means, literally means then to then. Equivalent in English, we say then and there. That very moment, in other words, at that very moment, it is necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana in the very place from which they arose. Uppatistana means the place of rising. What is the place from which all thoughts rise? They rise from ourselves. So it's only by keeping our attention fixed on ourselves, we are thereby not giving, we are not allowing our attention, if we allow our attention to follow the thoughts when they rise, they flourish, the little seed becomes a big tree. And we get carried away by our thoughts. But if we keep our attention firmly fixed on ourselves, the very moment the vasana sprouts as thoughts, they're destroyed then and there. Because we're not giving attention to them, because our whole attention is only on ourselves. So it's all, as Bhagavan often used to say, it's all a matter of attention. We are always aware of ourselves, we're not attending to ourselves. Instead of attending to ourselves, we're attending to other things. If we want to know what we actually are, we have to give up attending to other things, we have to attend only to ourselves. And by keenly and tenaciously clinging to ourselves, we give no room to the rising of other thoughts. That is, as soon as they arise, we destroy them then and there in the very place from which they arise. And then in the next sentence, he gives a definition of vairagya. Vairagya means, raga means passion or desire. So raga is what drives us to go outwards. All the viraga is freedom, is absence of that. The vairagya is an abstract noun from viraga. It means the quality of having viraga, of being free of not having desire. So in other words, it means desirelessness. And he uses another term also, which means basically the same, nirasa. Asa is desire, nirasa is freedom from desire. But Bhagavan gives a very novel definition of that, a very radical definition of it. Anyate nada dirtal vairagyam aladu nirase. Anya means what is other. Anything other than ourselves is anya. Anyate nada dirtal. That literally means being without attending or not attending to anything other, means anything other than ourselves. That is vairagya or nirase. So that is what we require. We need to have so much vairagya, but we are not inclined even to attend to anything else whatsoever. And obviously the other side of vairagya is if we are free of desire to attend to other things, what will we desire to attend to? Only ourselves. So that the love to attend to ourselves is bhakti. The freedom from desire to attend to other things is vairagya. So actually bhakti and vairagya, they're inseparable. They're like two sides of the same coin. So that is what we require. So as I say, in this sense, he says, not attending to anything other than oneself is vairagya or nirase. The next sentence he says, Tane vida dirital jnanam. Tane means oneself. Vida dirital literally means being without leaving, but a simple way of saying it is not leaving or not letting go of oneself is jnana. Jnana means knowledge or real awareness. So only when we're clinging firmly to ourselves, when we're not letting go of ourselves, that alone is real awareness. The awareness of things other than ourselves is not real awareness. It's what in Sanskrit there's a term, chittabhasa. Chittabhasa means semblance of awareness. Sometimes it's translated as reflection of awareness, just like because our reflection in a mirror is a semblance of us. It's a likeness of us. But the basic meaning of chittabhasa is a likeness or semblance of awareness. We seem to be aware, but we are not aware of what actually exists. That's ourself. Instead, we're aware of other things. So it's a false awareness. It's not a real awareness. So the real awareness is not letting go of ourself. In other words, being aware of ourself alone. And then in the next sentence he says, Unmeil irendum andre. In truth, two are one. Two are just one. Two means these two. The vairagya and jnana, they are one and the same thing. If we are not attending to anything else and clinging only to ourselves, that's one and the same thing. As by clinging to ourselves, we refrain from attending to anything else. So this is what Bhagavan wants us to do, not to let go of ourselves at all. That means to cling firmly to self-attentiveness without allowing our attention to be distracted or dragged away by anything else. This is the way to weaken and eventually overcome all our Vishaya vasanas. Then in the next sentence, he gives an analogy. Mutu kulipo means people who dive for pearls. Tamideil kalle katti kondu, murki kadal adil kidekum mutte epiti edu kiragalo. That is, just as pearl divers, tying stones to their waists and sinking, pick up pearls that are found at the bottom of the ocean, just like that. Apadiye means likewise or so in exactly the same way. Apadiye, Ovoruvanam, Vairagya Tudun, Tannul, Andu Murki, Atma Mutte Adayalam. Ovoruvanam means each one of us, with Vairagya. Here, Bhagavan is here comparing Vairagya to the stone that the divers tie to their waist in order to sink down. Without Vairagya, we cannot sink deep into ourselves. So each one of us with Vairagya, Tannul means within oneself, Andu Murki. Andu means, well, Andu Murki, they're two adverbial participles. They both mean more or less the same thing, namely submerging, sinking, plunging, diving, entering, piercing, or being deep. So since these two verbs are used, they can be interpreted to mean either. We can take the andu to be used as an adverb, deeply, sinking deeply or sinking deep, or we can take it to be two participles, submerging and sinking. If we take it in the sense, if we take it to be submerging and sinking, it means submerging beneath the surface activity of the mind and sinking deep within, or we can just simply take it as sinking deep within. It's up to us how we interpret it, but I mean, it all means the same. Obviously, we have to go beneath all the superficial activity of the mind, and we have to sink deep within ourselves. So each one sinking deep within oneself with Vairagya may attain the pearl of oneself. Adayalam, literally. The literal meaning, adayal means obtaining, and am means what is appropriate. So it means we may do it, we can do it. It can also mean let us do it. In some, so let us dive deep within ourselves and attain this Atma-mutu. Atma-mutu means the self-pearl, the pearl that is ourself. He's comparing our real nature there to the pearl that the pearl divers pick up. So this is a very nice analogy. In order to experience ourselves as we actually are, we've got to dive deep within ourselves, beneath all the superficial activity of the mind, down into the very depth of our heart, where we're aware of nothing other than ourselves. In order to dive so deep within ourselves, we need to have intense vairagya, because the desire is what is constantly pulling us outwards. If the pearl divers don't tie the stone to their waist, they can't dive deep enough to get the pearls. Likewise, without intense vairagya and its corollary, the intense bhakti, we cannot dive deep within and experience ourselves as we really are. Obviously, we're not literally diving or sinking within ourselves. This is because the subject that Bhagavan is talking about here is something which is beyond thoughts and therefore beyond words. It can't adequately be expressed in words. So Bhagavan often uses metaphorical language. So when he talks about diving or sinking deep within, he means we've got the ego which rose to be aware of other things has to cling firmly to itself in order to sink back into its source, into the place from which it rose. And then in the next sentence, he gives us a very great assurance. He makes it. He makes this. He explains. He makes it clear how very, very simple this is. What he says is, Oruvan tan sarupa de adeyam varayel nirantara swarupa dhyana swarupa smaranaye kaipatru vanayin adu andre podam. that means if one clings fast to uninterrupted Swarupa Smarana, Swarupa Smarana means self-remembrance or remembrance of our real nature, and until one obtains Swarupa, that alone is sufficient. Obviously, in the previous sentence he said we can obtain the pearl of self, and here he says we can obtain Swarupa. Obviously, Swarupa is our own real nature, so it's not something that we newly have to attain. It's already ours. Bhagavan often used to say there's nothing to be attained. All that is required is to give up, not to obtain anything or acquire anything or achieve anything, but to give up everything. But metaphorically, giving up everything else, what we remain with is our real nature. So that is, metaphorically speaking, obtaining our real nature, from which we've obviously never separated. So how to attain our real nature? If we cling firmly, until we attain it, if we cling firmly to Swarupa Smarana, that means self-remembrance. That is, it's another way of saying self-attentiveness. If we cling firmly to that self-attentiveness, until we experience our real nature, adu andre podum, that alone is sufficient. So nothing else is. In order to know ourselves, it's necessary to cling to ourselves. In order to know ourselves, it's also sufficient to cling to ourselves. So it's both necessary and sufficient. That when he says it's necessary in earlier sentences, he means there's no other means. No other means is adequate. Other means can purify the mind to some extent, but to root out the ego, which is the root, all the impurities of the mind are the Vishaya vasanas. In order to get rid of them entirely, we have to get rid of their root. And the only way to get rid of their root is to know ourselves as we actually are, because the root of the ego is nothing but a wrong awareness. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we have to investigate ourselves. That is, we have to turn our attention within and try to be aware of ourselves alone. So this is absolutely necessary, because there's no other means. If you want to see the sun, there's only one way to do so. You have to look up and see it. Likewise, to know ourselves as we actually are, to see what we actually are, we have to turn our attention within and look. It's as simple as that. So ultimately, whatever other spiritual path we may follow, ultimately we can achieve the final goal, the annihilation of ego, only by self-investigation. So self-investigation is absolutely necessary, and Bhagavan says in this sentence, it is also sufficient. If we merely tenaciously, persistently, patiently cling to that self-remembrance, that self-attentiveness, even in the midst of other activities, if we do so, he says, nirantara, uninterrupted. Obviously, at first when we start on this path, we're not able to do it uninterruptedly because we still have our vasanas are still very strong. But as our vasanas become attenuated more and more, it becomes easier and easier for us to cling to self-attentiveness, even in the midst of other activities. Because we have so much interest in that, even when we have to be engaged in other activities, we're able to cling on to the self-attentiveness. And if we cling on to that firmly, that alone is sufficient. That will unfailingly lead us to our goal. Because by clinging to that, we are chipping away at all this solid block of Vishaya vasanas that are there in our heart. We're slowly dissolving them in the strong acid of self-attentiveness, of self-remembrance. And when they're all dissolved, the ego will dissolve along with them, and what will then remain is Swarupa, our real nature. Then in the next two sentences, Bhagavan gives another analogy. Because he said earlier, but we as and when the thoughts arise, then and there we have to destroy them in the very place from which they arise. This analogy is with reference to that. He says, "Kote kul edirigal ulavaril Adilirandu veliye vandu konde irupagal. That is, so long as enemies are within the fort, they will be continuously coming out. Enemies here means the Vishaya vasanas. The fort is our own heart, or the mind. So long as the vasanas are there within us, they'll be constantly coming out. Why they're constantly coming out? Because ego doesn't want to let go, because ego doesn't want to be dissolved back into its source. The Vishaya vasanas are nothing but the ego's desires. So long as the ego is there, its desires will constantly be dragging it outwards. So that Bhagavan says, compares that to enemies coming out of the fort. And as he said in the earlier sentence, as soon as they arise, then and there, in the very place from which they rise, we have to destroy them. So we can't let the whole army of enemy come out together. We have to be vigilantly there as and when they come out of the fort, one by one, chopping them down. And when all the soldiers have come out and been killed, finally the general himself will have to come out. The general is the ego. So he's the final one. When he comes out, that is, and we chop him down by self-attentiveness, that is the end of the story. And so in the next sentence he says, Vara vara avagale ellam vetti konde irandal kote kaivasapadam. That means if one is continuously cutting down or destroying them, all of them, as and when they come, the fort will eventually be captured. That is, we'll eventually regain our place in the 7th verse of Arunachashtakam. Bhagavan says we'll be the emperor seated under the one umbrella. That is, we'll be reinstalled on our throne, our rightful throne, which is our own heart. We'll be back where we belong. So these two paragraphs, Bhagavan gives us so many, he emphasizes so strongly the need for a persistent self-attentiveness in order to destroy all Vishaya vasanas. Because without destroying Vishaya vasanas to a great extent, we won't be willing to let go of ego. Only when we let go of ego, finally, once ego is the root, so once ego is cut, once ego is eradicated, rooted out, all its Vishaya vasanas will die along with it. When a tree is cut, its leaves and branches will all die. But in this case, it's not a slow process, it's an instantaneous process. As soon as ego is destroyed, everything else is destroyed with it. But in order to destroy it, it's like a dense bush. If we want to root out a dense bush, we first have to a large extent cut off the leaves and branches. The leaves and branches are the Vishaya vasanas. Why we have to cut them off? Because we can't get at the root, because they're too thick. So only when we cut them back to a large extent, we don't have to cut them back entirely, but cut them back to a large extent so we can get at the root, then we can cut the root and the story is over. So we need to be destroying Vishaya vasanas until finally the ego itself comes out to a fort, metaphorically speaking, and is destroyed by pure self-attentiveness. So this is the path that Bhagavan has shown us. As he often said, it's actually very, very easy. It seems difficult because of our lack of willingness. In order to cultivate that willingness, all we have to do is to persevere in this practice of self-attentiveness. And the other side of because when we attend to ourself, because ego rises by clinging to other things, when we cling to ourself, we are letting go of everything else. So self-investigation and self-surrender are actually one and the same thing. We can surrender mine, everything but all my desires and things to a certain extent without self-investigation. But the surrender will become complete. It's self-surrender, Atma-samarpanam. We've got to surrender ourselves. So in order to surrender ourselves, that means the ego, the only means is self-investigation. So the path of surrender leads to and merges in the path of self-investigation. So bhakti, and Bhagavan often used to say, bhakti is the mother of jnana. This path of self-investigation is the pinnacle of the culmination of the path of self-surrender, which is itself the culmination of the path of bhakti. So this is the end of the end. But it requires patient perseverance. We have to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. But that alone is sufficient. Nothing else Bhagavan asks of us.
So, for a few years I've been doing a self-investigation.
Yes.
And the more I investigated, the more I truly felt that the desires were dropping off. The more the desires dropped off, the more I felt my ego falling and dropping. Now, it became a very easy process for me, slowly and steadily, baby step at a time, because the more my ego dropped, the more I felt the presence of something very powerful. So I found my ego dropping in connection with witnessing or feeling or sensing something very powerful. So I would like to ask you if this is my first visit here, so I'd like to ask you if there's anything in any of these writings that connect the dropping of your ego along with something very powerful. And I don't believe in religion at all.
Okay, that very powerful thing, is it something other than you?
So that's part of my investigation. And many a time I feel it's assimilated inside me. So I feel the presence actually inside me, and in a strange way I follow certain signs and synchronicities.
Yes.
And because of that it becomes, it feels like one.
Yes.
And yet it makes me drop my ego further, because sometimes I feel I'm not in control.
Yes.
And yet it's me that's in control. So I feel that presence that is assimilated.
But the thing is, our real nature is pure self-awareness. That is ever present. But we overlook it because we're so interested in other things. When we begin to follow this path, turning our attention within, we experience a fresh clarity of self-awareness. That fresh clarity of self-awareness is what Bhagavan calls spurana. Spurana means the shining or the shining forth. So it's like clarity of self-awareness, but we experience. Because instead of constantly looking at other things, we are looking at ourselves afresh. So Sadhguru used to say it's a new, clear awareness of ourselves. Nuclear being a pun, or nuclear.
That's beautiful.
That ultimately will destroy everything, like a nuclear bomb. So it's a fresh, clear experience. If that is what you are referring to as something powerful, yes, that is our real nature. It is not actually new or fresh. It seems to be new or fresh because our mind has been constantly going outwards. We are looking at ourselves afresh. But the more we attend to that, the more the newness and freshness subsides. Bhagavan gave an analogy for this. He said, if you light a piece of camphor, it'll burn bright, but eventually the camphor itself will be burnt away, and along with the burning away of the camphor, the flame itself will subside. The flame will also subside. Likewise, by clinging to this attentive self-awareness, this is like the flame that catches the camphor. The camphor is our ego, or ego along with its bundle of vasanas. It's slowly, slowly burnt away. When ego itself is finally destroyed, the sparana subsides, Bhagavan said. What he means by the sparana subsides is not that the self-awareness subsides, because self-awareness is always there. Its newness subsides. It ceases to be a new experience. It becomes sahaja. It's our natural state.
Thank you.
So this, if I've understood you correctly, what you refer to as something very powerful is that very powerful and clear self-awareness. That is not something new. That is what is always there. It's just we have uncovered it a little, so it's shining a bit more brightly. The sun was always there, but it was behind thick clouds. Now it's beginning to peep out. The clouds are getting thinner, it's beginning to peep out. That is the sparana. That is what you call that. It is very, very powerful, because this Bhagavan sometimes, a few months after the atom bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Bhagavan said, when the atom bomb of jnana descends, it will destroy all the crores of all the countless universes, or worlds, or whatever they be. It'll destroy all of them, because they're all built on the flimsy foundation of ego. So this is the nuclear bomb that will destroy the ego. So it is very, very powerful. And another reason why it's very powerful, Bhagavan has written a verse about Shanti and Shakti. Bhagavan says, what looks like power when turned outwards is experienced as peace when turned within. The power and the peace are one and the same. Sadhuam explained that with an analogy. If you want to build a dam, you have to build a very, very strong dam. But it has to be very strong in order to hold all the water in place. So long as the dam is holding the water in place, it's quiet and peaceful. If there's a crack in the dam and the water is released, that is like the appearance of all this universe. That is actually the creation of the universe is not a sign of power. It's a loss of power. Just like if a dam cracks and the water begins to leak out, it's not that is a loss of power, because all that power, the water being held in that dam is so powerful, it can generate so much electricity, it can water so many paddy fields. It's got so much power in it because of its stillness. So the real power is the power of silence, the shanti, the peace. So all the great, wonderful power we see outside that produces the Big Bang and all these wonderful things that we hear about, and all the power we see, people are playing power games between themselves, different countries, and all sorts of, or between individuals there are power games going on. All these are very, very trivial powers compared to the true power which is there in our heart. That is the power of silence and perfect peace. That is our real nature.
Did you, this powerful experience you had, did this feel like your true self?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely my true self. It was actually perpetuated by a very strange experience in my life that happened in 2015. And before that experience, I never believed in anything. I won't say I was an atheist. I didn't believe in anything. But looking for an answer for my 1 hour 48 minutes of my life on December 19, 2015, completely has spun my life around. And that's when I began my self-investigation. And the more I investigated, the more I understood, and I started feeling this presence which we talk about, or the universe. I don't want to give it any name because it has no name. But to me, it's not a
But
someone.
is it your true self? Did you feel that's it? Yeah. Because just what I was going to say is that if it wasn't, if it was a very powerful experience that seemed to be removing your ego, the advice perhaps Bhagavan would have given would be to ask who is aware of that powerful experience. So you always want to be moving backward to the reality and not get somehow stuck in something that might be really impressive. But that's really interesting that you...
But it dropped my ego so much on that day that it was like, what? And that was enough for me, but then began my journey of self-investigation after it. So more than the experience that happened in my life, that's left its relevance. But the more the self-investigation that's going on after that is bringing me slowly, step by step, and I'll be researching probably till my dying day. But it's really bringing me closer to what they call the light. That's what I truly feel inside me. And I live my life.
Thank you. Thanks.
At the beginning of your talk, you said, Bhagavan said, if one only realised that you weren't giving up anything, although you feel you're giving up everything, there's nothing to give up.
That is, we do have to give up, but what we have to give up is very, very trivial compared to what we gain. We are giving up the finite in exchange for the infinite.
Well, like this lady, the clouds parted for a moment, and I had an experience where I realised I had everything, so I didn't need to go outside for anything. And that, of course, went away immediately, starting the old habits. What you're asking us is to reform our habits of mind, which are vasanas, aren't you?
Yes,
and constantly reform again and again.
But the natural flow of the mind is outwards.
Yes.
That is the nature of the mind, is to go outwards.
Yes.
Bhagavan is asking us to turn that around.
Yes.
It seems like swimming against the current,
Yeah.
but we're returning to our source.
Yes. The difficulty is the constant habits reasserting themselves. So if you're going to try and eliminate the negative habits, do you refer back to when the clouds parted for a short while and remember, actually I've got everything, I don't need to ask for anything else?
Reflection, that is thinking within ourselves, is obviously it's part of the process.
Yes.
But when the clouds parted, you experience something fresh and clear. That thing, fresh and clear thing, if that is your real nature, I mean, you didn't experience it with full clarity, but you experienced it more clearly than normal, that is always there.
But the true experience is always there to reflect on.
Yes.
And that's not a bad attitude or habit.
No. Sometimes the spiritual path is described as Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Sravana means hearing or reading. Manana is thinking about it, reflecting about it, reasoning about it, trying to assimilate it so that we understand when Bhagavan says that this is all a dream, why he says so. So we think about it. So that process is manana. And nididhyasana means deep contemplation. That is the actual self-attentiveness. But they're not actually three watertight compartments. When we are reading, we're naturally thinking about what Bhagavan is saying. If we're not doing manana when we are reading Bhagavan's words, we're not really doing it attentively. If we're attentively reading Bhagavan's words, we will be reflecting about it in our mind. And what is the main subject Bhagavan is talking about? I. So when he's talking about I, automatically our attention turns back within. So they're seamless. There's Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. There's no clear boundary between one and the next. Each one leads on seamlessly to the next one. So often when we're thinking about, like Bhagavan's given us so many clues for the path of surrender. He says when you're traveling on a train, why to carry your luggage on your head? You know the train is carrying the burden. Bhagavan is asking us, relax. Don't be concerned about anything. Bhagavan asks us only one thing, just relax, be happy. Of course, we can't be happy so long as our mind is going outwards. So he's not saying, but I mean, essentially what he is, this path of self-investigation is the path of letting go of everything, taking the luggage from our head and putting it aside, and relaxing. So when we think of all these clues, by merely thinking of them, we begin to put them into practice. We all face so many difficulties in life. Life has so many challenges, but every challenge in life is an opportunity for us to surrender, to let go a little bit more. So the reflection on Bhagavan's teachings and the practice, they go on side by side, and there's one merges seamlessly into the other. So constant reflection on his teachings is the greatest aid to put it in practice, because we still do have strong Vishaya vasanas. Our mind is, the natural flow of our mind is still going outwards. If it goes outwards, let's think about Bhagavan and his teachings, because that is the greatest aid to turning back within.
And it makes you laugh at yourself too.
Yeah, it does.
As we go on doing the self-enquiry, there comes a point when the thoughts disappear, the thoughts become less and less, and there's more space in between thoughts. There's a state of blankness. Now, that's obviously not the state of self-realization, because the mind does come back from time to time. But during these periods of space or lack of thought, absence of thought, Bhagavan says you have to still continue inquiring, because the person has not disappeared.
Yes.
So when you experience long states of uninterrupted peace or blankness, how often do you inquire? Because there's a tendency to fall back and say, I'm peaceful now, I don't need to inquire. But the mind comes back at times when you least expect it.
Well, first thing we have to understand is we are never actually, in the waking and dream state, we are never entirely without thoughts. Many people, when Bhagavan talks about thoughts, many people associate the word thoughts with the mental chatter that goes on in our mind. But Bhagavan uses thoughts in a much broader sense than that. He says the whole world is nothing but thought. That is perception. What he means by thought is all types of mental phenomena. And according to him, all phenomena are mental phenomena. Now we think this world consists of physical phenomena. We think these are solid things. We think these are all physical. But what actually are all these physical things? They're nothing but perceptions. Bhagavan says in Ulludunapti in verse, I think verse 4, the world is nothing but the form of the five sense perceptions. What we call the world is nothing but sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and tactile sensations. Other than this, there is no world. So the whole thing is mental. So any type of phenomena, any feeling, any emotion, they're all thoughts according to Bhagavan. So even when we're practicing self-attentiveness, we may feel we're in a state of peaceful state, relatively free of thoughts, but even that state is a thought. The only time when we are actually totally free of thoughts is sleep. Because what is the first thought? The first thought is ego. The thought, I am so and so. So long as I feel, so long as I am practicing self-attentiveness, who is practicing? It's me, Michael, who's practicing. So that basic thought, I am Michael, is still there. So we never experience complete absence of thought except in sleep. So whatever peace we experience while practicing meditation is a temporary peace. It's something that comes and goes. Whatever comes and goes is not real. So to whom is this peace? Who is experiencing this? We don't have to ask the question. When Bhagavan talks about the term that is often translated as inquiry in English is vichara, which is better translated as investigation. We're investigating. So it's not a matter of asking questions. It's a matter of looking back. Who is aware of this? Who is enjoying this peace? Though I express it in terms of a question, I'm talking not about asking the question, I'm talking about looking within to see who is it? Who am I? Who is it? To whom do all these thoughts appear? It's not just a questioning, it's an investigation. If I ask you to investigate what is written in this book, you don't say, what is written in this book, what is written in this book? You open it and look inside. If I ask you to investigate what's that sound there, you listen very keenly to hear what it is. You don't say, what is the sound, what is the sound? So investigate means it requires attention, keen observation. So we have to keenly observe ourselves, keenly attend to ourselves, watch ourselves. But all these terms, whatever words we use, none of them are quite adequate because we are not an object but we can watch. We are not. So these are all metaphorical ways of saying it. We have to look at ourselves. Look at ourselves doesn't mean like we look at objects. It means be aware of ourselves, attend to ourselves. That's why in verse 44 of Arunachakramlai, Bhagavan says, Tirumbiya handane dinamaha kankan terium and Arunachala. He said, Tirumbiya ham means turning within. Tane dinam aha kankan. Aha kan means with the inner eye. So we have to see ourselves constantly see ourselves with the inner eye. What he means by the inner eye is the is the attention. Attention is the eye through which we see or perceive all other things. We see our thoughts through attention. We see the sounds, the sights, the tastes. It's all through attention. So that attention is the inner eye. So with that inward turned attention, we have to see ourselves. Then he gives the assurance, terium, it will be known. That's all we have to do, to constantly be looking within.
And consciousness is another word for attention, really?
Not quite. Attention is a selective use of consciousness. We're always conscious, but there are so many things here. Out of all these things that we are conscious of, we focus on certain things. That focusing of our consciousness or awareness is what is called attention. Yes.
Hi, sorry, I've got a very basic question. Can you expand a little bit about the mechanism of attending to ourselves?
It's not exactly a mechanism. It's, I think the easiest way to because for many people it seems, many people find it difficult to understand at first what self-attentiveness means, because we all know how to attend to objects. But our self seems something very nebulous. What exactly do we attend to? Well, obviously we're not an object. So I think that perhaps the easiest way to explain it is we are always self-aware. You acknowledge that you're self-aware. You're aware of yourself. You're aware I am. But though we are always self-aware, we are generally negligently self-aware. That is, because of our interest in other things, we attend to other things and tend to overlook the fundamental self-awareness. Though, as I said earlier, the fundamental self-awareness is like the screen on which everything else appears. So we're aware of other things only because we're aware of ourselves. And whether we are aware of ourselves, whether we're aware of other things or not, we're always aware of ourselves. So our basic experience is self-awareness. But though we are all self-aware, and we all know what is meant by self-awareness, we are generally negligently self-aware because we take more interest in other things. So instead of taking interest in other things, we have to take interest in our self-awareness. We have to, instead of being negligently self-aware, we have to be attentively self-aware. Does that help make it any clearer?
Well, I was wondering if things like mindfulness is...
What mindfulness means, mindfulness is another term for attentiveness. But what is the type of meditation that is called mindfulness, there's a vipassana meditation, is generally nowadays called mindfulness meditation. That entails attending to things other than oneself, starting off attending to the breathing, and then attending to sensations in the body. But instead of attending, what Bhagavan asks us to do is not to attend to anything, any object, any phenomena, but to attend to the one who is aware of all these things. So it is mindfulness, but instead of mindfulness of other things, it's mindfulness of ourself, of our own self-awareness.
So mindfulness of your own presence?
Yep, that's the way of saying it.
You're aware of matter, so to speak, form.
Yeah.
When the ego dies,
Yes.
the thought will disappear.
Yes. Bhagavan said the ego is the root of all thoughts. Why Bhagavan said that? Though ego is itself a thought, that's why he sometimes referred to it as the thought called I, or in English it's translated as I thought. It is a thought unlike all other thoughts, because no other thought is aware. All other thoughts are non-aware, insentient. If you have any thought, it's not aware of itself and it's not aware of other things. What is it that is aware of thoughts? It's only ego. So, because ego is the thought that is aware of itself and of all other thoughts, it is a thought, but it's a thought unlike all other thoughts. And no thought can exist except in awareness. So, what is aware of the thoughts? Only ego. So, in the absence of ego, there can be no other thought.
So everything will disappear.
Like in sleep.
You go into nothingness.
It's not nothingness, actually. It
Well,
is, Bhagavan says it's fullness.
the absolute.
Yeah, it's fullness. It is nothingness in the sense of it is devoid of phenomena.
Right, which is nothingness.
Yes, the real nothingness is all of this.
Absolutely.
Phenomena are nothingness, they are the real sunya, real void.
Right.
The absence of the void is the state of fullness, which is our real nature.
So basically, the void. It is the void. It is the.
It is void in the sense that it's devoid of phenomena.
Absolutely.
But it is the fullness of Satchidananda, being,
Yes.
awareness and happiness,
Which is reality.
which is what alone really exists.
Okay, thanks.
And though we say being, awareness and happiness, being itself is awareness, happiness itself, all these three are one and the same thing. Being is awareness and happiness. Happiness is awareness and being. Awareness is happiness and being. So, there are three terms that describe the same thing. Our real nature is being, because we exist. It's awareness, because we're aware. And it's infinite happiness, because we are happy, because happiness is our real nature. It's what we actually are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
So what I was just wondering is this. I'm a bit confused by what you said about the ego. So what I always assumed was that there is just this awareness, which we call the self. We can call it whatever we want to. This awareness which is simply aware. You can call it aware of existence, aware of itself, whatever, but it has no contents. And then I've always thought that the idea of the ego as ahankara is a kind of a grasping, a sort of a clinging, we try and make things me or mine. And I always thought there's just, it's not exactly an action or an act, but it's a kind of a movement, I suppose, which takes place in a way, or something, but anyway, it's a grasping, it's a clinging. So I wasn't very sure what you meant by the ego being a conscious thought, unlike other thoughts. I'm not too sure about what you meant by that. I'm not quite sure how this thing works anyway.
The ego is aware. The ego is what is aware of all these phenomena.
So could one say that, I'm just trying to picture this, picture it literally. So we've got this awareness or just awareness, right? And then we have this kind of limited view in which we are aware of me and the world out there, subject-object, right? That's how we always do it, right? And this is this kind of ego vision of the world, me and everything else. So I thought, maybe what the ego is, or what this grasping does, is that it limits. It's like the Shankara thing, the pot which has the bit of space and around. So I guess the ego, maybe just in terms of picturing it, is it's that pot, or maybe in a way. So that's maybe the grasping kind of aspect, but I'm still not sure.
We can use all sorts of analogies to
try
to
very
explain
difficult.
it. But the thing is, one of the things we need to understand is the distinction between pure awareness and the awareness which is called ego. Pure awareness is not aware of anything. It is just aware. The awareness we experience in sleep is pure awareness. In sleep we are not aware of anything, yet we are aware. If at all we're aware of anything, we're aware of ourselves, but ourself is not an object. So words fail when we try to express these things. So our real nature is pure awareness or pure self-awareness. We're not aware of anything other than ourselves, but ourself is not an object of our awareness. So awareness without any objects, without any content, or however we wish to express it, that is our real nature. But there's another spurious awareness that arises. But Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Uludunaptu, this jada body, jada means it's non-aware. This body has no awareness. This jada body does not say I. When he says does not say I, that's a metaphorical way. Obviously, it's through our lips that we say I. When he says does not say I, that's a metaphorical way of saying the body is not aware of itself as I. And when he says body, he's not just talking about this physical form. He's talking about all the five sheaths. Because we never experience this body as I. We never experience a dead body as I. It's always a living body. And we always, when we experience the body as I, the body has mind and has intellect and has will. So all these five together, the physical form, the life that animates it, and the mind, intellect and will that are working within it, this makes one package. That package is these five sheaths, or what Bhagavan calls body. So when he says a body doesn't say I, he means all our desires they don't say I because they have no awareness. Our intellect doesn't say I, it's got no awareness. Mind doesn't have awareness. What has awareness is only ego. So Bhagavan said, the body does not say I. Satchit means being awareness or real awareness, does not rise. But in between these two, one thing called I rises as the extent of the body. That is ego. When he says it rises in between, again he's talking metaphorically, because what is Satchit? Satchit is the pure awareness that we actually are. That is formless and therefore infinite. So there can't be anything between. Can there be anything between the rope and the snake? There's actually only a rope there. The rope seems to be a snake. There's nothing in between them. But when he says it rises in between, what he means is it's a metaphorical way of saying. For example, if I ask you if this, I've heard a story, I say, is the story true? You may say, it's neither true nor false, but somewhere in between. What you mean is it's got elements of truth, it's got elements of falsehood. It's a mixture of the two. So when Bhagavan says it rises in between the body and Satchit, he means it borrows qualities of both. Like the body, it's limited in time and space. It appears and it disappears. Like Satchit, it is aware. So it's a mixture of certain qualities of our real nature in that it's aware, and certain qualities of the body in that it's finite, limited in time and space. So Bhagavan says, this is Chit Jada Granti. Chit Jada Granti means Chit is the pure awareness, Jada is what is non-aware, referring to the body. It's Granti means not. If you tangle two pieces of string together, you get a knot. Does the knot have any existence apart from those two pieces of string? It doesn't. If you unravel it, you've got two pieces of string, knot has gone. So knot is only when these two things are entangled together. So it's only when this spurious I rises, as I am this body, that is ego. So ego is the perceiver, the seer, the subject. All phenomena are objects. So you've got subject and object. Subject is not our real nature, because for our real nature there are no objects. There's nothing other than it. It alone exists. So the subject is only ego. The perceiver is ego. That is why they talk about drisya viveka. That is distinguishing the seer from the seen. And in the text, drisya viveka, they go through a sort of step-by-step process. The eye is what sees the world. But what sees the eye is the mind, and what sees the mind is the sakshi, that's ego. But actually, the real perceiver, the real seer, or sakshi as it's called, is only ego. Sometimes it is said that Brahman is sakshi, but that is using sakshi in a different sense. Sakshi means witness, but it's sometimes used in the sense of presence. In the mere presence of Brahman, all this seems to exist. In that sense, Brahman is the Sakshi. Not that Brahman is aware of all this, but it's in and by the mere presence of Brahman, but all these things seem to exist.
So what's kind of happening there is that it's almost like there is this this kind of base awareness, which is not aware of anything at any point in time or whatever. It's never aware of anything. It's just this rock awareness, whatever, existence awareness, that's what it is. On that, then we have what we normally take to be awareness or consciousness of ourselves, of the world, and which is of course the egoic self and so on. Yeah, because I think the distinction there is between that which is not aware of anything and never becomes aware, and that which becomes aware.
Real awareness is being awareness. It doesn't rise or subside. It doesn't appear or disappear. The awareness that appears and disappears, ego appears in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. So it's not real awareness. It's only a temporary semblance of awareness. Yeah. So ego is the perceiver. That is why Bhagavan says the ego itself is a thought. It's the root of all other thoughts, but it itself is a thought. However, unlike all other thoughts, no other thought is aware of anything. But ego is aware of both itself and all other thoughts. So it is other thoughts are objects perceived. Ego is the perceiving subject, the perceiver.
And that ego, that awareness has the sense I am.
Yes, but it doesn't have the sense I am alone. It's got the
sense of I in terms of another.
I am Michael, I am Shalini. That mixed awareness, that is ego. So, because if we observe our experience, have we ever experienced anything other than ourselves, except when we experience ourselves as a person? In waking and dream, we experience ourselves as a person, that's as a body, and so we're aware of other things. In sleep, we don't experience ourselves. We're not at all aware of this body or anybody. So we're not aware of anything. We are just aware.
In terms of words, what is, I mean, they'll say that the base awareness, let's call it base awareness or whatever, they say that that's sort of Atman or whatever, the self and so on. But in terms of things like chit and chitta, you know, sort of the ego level and the base level, I'm just wondering what the two distinctions are in terms of awareness. Are there two separate words which can be used?
There are no separate words. I mean, there are words used to distinguish it. When we talk about ego, we are distinguishing this rising I, the ego, from the real I, the being I, which is always there. So there are, I mean, the term in English books, on Bhagavan or any English books on Advaita philosophy, we often come across the word the self with a capital S. There is no such word in any Indian language. Firstly, because there's no articles, you can't say the, and secondly, because there's no capital letters. The term that is generally translated as the self is Atman. But what Atman actually means is oneself.
Oneself, yeah, it's a reflexive.
So, but it's again a dualistic thinking, but translates Atman as the self. And as soon as you call it the self, you've reified it. You've made it into something other than yourself. Is Atman anything other than ourself? No, Atman is ourself. So, but if you call it the self, there's me and there's the self, and I've got to try and attain the self. It's a dualistic thinking, but because the thing is, Advaita philosophy is a very, very subtle philosophy, and it's also in the old books. It has become very, very complicated because people are trying to understand it. Bhagavan. Thank God for Bhagavan, because Bhagavan has simplified things so much. He's made what had previously become a very, very complex philosophy, he made it very, very simple. He boiled it all down to ego. Ego is the root of everything. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That sounds a very radical teaching when Bhagavan says that in Uludunapali verse 26. But actually it's the daily experience of all of us. In sleep there's no ego, nothing else is there. In waking and dream there's ego and there's all these other things. So it's actually our own experience, but we like to think that these other things exist independent of our perception of them. That, Bhagavan says, is not true. We like to think when we go to sleep at night, though we're not aware of anything, the world is going on, and we wake up in the morning and we turn on the news and we hear all the news from the night, and we ask our friends who've been working night shifts, and they say, yes, the world went on all throughout the night. But all those other people, and all the evidence for the existence of the world when we're asleep, presents itself to us only in waking and dream. It's all the evidence is part of a world whose existence is in question. So Bhagavan said, calling on the testimony of other people to prove the existence of the world when you're asleep is like calling on a thief to provide testimony, but he didn't steal. We can't rely on that testimony. Was the world existing while we were asleep? If it was existing, it certainly didn't tell us it was existing. And since we were aware in sleep, if it had existed, why weren't we aware of it? So according to Bhagavan, all these things appear only because we have appeared as this ego. And ego is that false self-awareness that rises, I am this person. Doesn't have to be the same person. If the body we experience as ourself in dream is not the same body we experience as ourself now. But just as much as this body now seems to be I, it's actually, my experience now is I am this body. That's I'm actually aware of myself as such. My actual experience in sleep is, at that time, I also felt I am this body, but the body happened to be a different one. So if this body comes to an end without the ego being annihilated, dreams will continue. We'll continue dreaming one life after another. But all these things exist only in the view of ourself as ego. In the view of ourself as we really are, which is what we experience in sleep, nothing else exists.
I was just wondering, I'm not sure if somebody has, this is just very quick one. The word which is sometimes used in some of the Upanishads is a chidghana.
Sorry?
This word which is sometimes used in the Upanishads is a chidghana, this sort of a density, this mass of awareness. And I thought that this must be sort of what they're talking about as Atman, basically, and then you've got all these flaky bits of ego arising on top or whatever.
Words will always fail to describe that.
Exactly.
But chidghana is one way of saying it is. All of this has appeared in awareness. But in what awareness has it appeared? It's in the awareness of the ego. But where did ego appear? From where did it appear? It has to be within the infinite awareness, which is our real nature.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Michael. So my question may be very basic for a lot of us. The question is that,
Basic questions are good, but we need to keep to the basics.
So, we, having come from India, we've always been taught about spirituality and the fact that we are the Atman, we are not this body. All this is fine, and I do believe in it. But when we live our practical life, there come moments when we have to decide, and then there are attachments which bring misery and suffering. So in the realm of spirituality, how do you deal with decision making? Do I really have to make a decision, or is it all done for me? And how do I deal with my attachments,
When you're traveling on a train, you can make decisions. You can decide to carry your luggage on your head. You can decide if you think the train isn't going fast enough, you can decide to get up and pace up and down. Or if you think the service provided, if you think the snacks or whatever are provided on the train aren't good enough, you can pick up a fight with the train staff. Or if you don't like your neighbor, you can pick up a fight with them. You can make so many decisions. But in spite of whatever decision you make, the train is going on unaffected by all your decisions, and it's going to reach its destination. So whether you make decisions or you don't make decisions, what is to happen is going to happen anyway. So why not leave everything to the higher power? That when Bhagavan used that analogy of the train he's referring to God, the supreme power that is driving, that is making all things happen. We are free, while as a passenger on the train, we are free to carry our luggage on the head. There's no rule that we shouldn't. We are free to pace up and down, we're free to do so many things, but we don't make any difference. The train is still going on at the speed it's meant to go, and it will reach its destination at the appointed time. So when we think that we have to make decisions, we're taking the luggage on our head. Okay, in day-to-day life we do have to make decisions, but the decisions that have to be made have already been made. We think, oh, I decided this, I did this, because we take on the doership. So if we understand that everything Bhagavan is taking, Bhagavan is driving all these things, we don't even have to worry about making decisions. When the time comes to make a decision, we'll make the appropriate decision. The problem is there are two things that we are not the actor. The ego is actually just what is aware of all this. But as ego, we experience ourselves as this body and mind. So we experience the actions of this body and mind as actions done by me. That is how the doership comes in there. And because we have desires, fears, hopes, aspirations, likes, dislikes and things, certain things are destined to happen. Whatever is destined to happen is going to happen anyway, according to Bhagavan. We cannot change anything that we are destined to experience. And in order to experience that, you say you're from India, so you were born in India, somehow you've ended up in London.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah, so you must have done certain actions, made certain decisions on the way, but resulted in your ending up here. All those are according to prarabdha. Because you were destined to be in London on this particular day, this particular minute, in this particular place, your prarabdha there was a long chain of decisions that led to this. So prarabdha is driving all these things. So whatever we are destined to experience, we will experience. But prarabdha is not the only force that is driving the actions of this body and mind. Because we also have a will. And our will, what is destined to happen is going to happen. We cannot change it. What we are to experience, we will experience. What we are not to experience, we will not experience. We cannot change it. But we're free to want to change it. So we don't know what our destiny is, what our prarabdha is. So we have so many likes and dislikes. We want this, we don't want that. So the body, speech and mind, the actions of them are driven by prarabdha and also by our will. So we cannot distinguish which actions are driven by which. And in most cases, if, for example, you have ended up coming to London, did you come to London totally against your will? There must have been, almost certainly there was some liking in you to end up here. Or you had some reason for coming here.
There was some reason.
Yeah, okay. So there was some reason. So it may not have been your topmost priority, but it was certain desires of yours led to your being here. Yeah. It seems. But even if you had no desire to come here at all, or if you had no desire to be here with your family, or whatever be the circumstances that led to your coming here, even if you had no desire for any of these, you would have ended up here according to prarabdha. But while experiencing prarabdha, we often want what we are destined to experience. So though our actions are being driven by prarabdha, they're simultaneously being driven by our will. So the problem is the will. It's not the actions we do are not binding. What binds is the desire with which we do action, the will. That is why prarabdha is what we're destined to experience. That is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. But it's not actions of the prarabdha-driven actions that we've done in the past. It's the result of the desire-driven actions that we've done in the past. So it's our desires which are all karma, the the fruits of karma are generated by agamya. Agamya are the actions we do by desire. It may be, for example, it may be my prarabdha to have a PhD. So in order to have a PhD, I need to go through certain actions. I need to study hard and everything. But the chances are that I would also have wanted that PhD because I wanted to become a professor or something. I might have got my PhD and not become a professor, but anyway, I was driven by some desire. So many things we do in life, they may be according to prarabdha. If they turn out the way we want them to turn out, or even remotely like what we want them to turn out, they're according to prarabdha. But our will is also playing a role there. So the will is the problem. The decisions that you have to make according to prarabdha, you'll be made to make. You have no choice. If it's your prarabdha to leave India and come to UK, you will make decisions along the way that lead to this. But you also make decisions according to your will. We cannot distinguish which decisions are according to prarabdha, which are according to will. So how do we solve this problem? Give up our will. Give up our likes and dislikes. Obviously we cannot do so entirely, but we can begin to let go of these desires, let go of these attachments. Our aim is to gain this vairagya. We can, by trying to turn our attention within, or if this path doesn't appeal to us by bhakti or whatever means, we try to wean our mind away from its desires and attachments, its hopes, its fears, its likes, its dislikes. In the second last paragraph of Who Am I, of Nāṉ Ār, Bhagavan says, Virupu Verupu Rendame Verika Takadu. Likes and dislikes are both fit to be disliked. So we need to free ourselves, we need to wean our mind away from all its likes and dislikes. If we give up all our desires, then the actions will go on without us interfering in them. So when Bhagavan wrote that note to his mother, he wrote, the first sentence he wrote, Avarava Prarabdha Prakaram Adhikanavan Angangiritu Atuvipan. That means, according to the prarabdha of each person, he who is for that, meaning God, being in each place, being there, will make them act. He will make them dance, is what he says literally. So we are being made to dance. But then why Bhagavan said that to his mother? Because she wanted him to come back to Madurai. So he's indirectly he's telling her, according to prarabdha I've been brought here, until and unless my prarabdha takes me elsewhere, this can't be changed. That's why he said that. Then in the next sentence he said, that which is not to happen will not happen however much effort is made. And in the third sentence he says, that which is to happen will not stop however much obstruction is made. People who read it superficially think, oh, everything is according to prarabdha. That is not so. Because he says, however much effort we make, however much obstruction we make, we are free to try to avoid, to make things happen which are not destined to happen, and to avoid things which are destined to happen. We have that freedom. We have freedom to want, it's my destiny to suffer, but I'm still free to want not to suffer. Destiny can't change my desires. I want to live a happy life, but I'm destined to live a miserable life. The destiny can't change my desire. I will continue wanting to live a happy life. So destiny, our will and destiny are two separate things. Both are driving the actions of our body and speech and mind, but the will can never change what we are destined to experience. So the best thing is to give up our will. That's why Bhagavan ended that note. He's after that saying that what is to happen will happen no matter how much we try to stop it, and what is not to happen will not happen however much effort we make. He says, iduve tinam, this is certain. So we cannot change prarabdha an iota. Then he ends by saying, Ahalin monamai irake nandru. Therefore, being quiet is good. What would be the necessity for him to say being quiet is good? If everything was according to prarabdha, then it doesn't matter whether we're quiet or not. If it's our prarabdha to be quiet, we'll be quiet. If it's not our prarabdha to be quiet, we will not be quiet. What he means by being quiet is giving up our likes and dislikes, giving up our desires, not making effort either to experience what is not destined or to avoid what is destined. As I said, we cannot know what is destined or what is not destined. We cannot know which decisions we make, which actions are according to destiny or according to will. All we can do is to surrender our will. Everything else will be taken care of. So you can't stop making decisions. There are certain decisions that you are destined to make. You'll continue making those decisions. Try to give up the likes and dislikes, the desires. Then the decisions will be made only by prarabdha and not by you. Well, it'll still seem to you I'm making these decisions, but the force that drives you to make those decisions is prarabdha, which another word for prarabdha is God's will. Because he is the one who has selected the fruits of our past karmas, which ones to experience when. So it's all according to his will. So if we're on the path of devotion, everything is his will. Let me, Bhagavan says in Arunachapatikam, Ninishtam enishtam, imbaraku. That is, your will is my will. That itself is happiness for me. So we shouldn't want anything that he doesn't want. We don't know what he wants in terms of this outer life. So leave it to him. Let anything happen. Whatever happens, it's according to his will. But one thing we do know what he wants us to subside and to be happy. By rising his ego, we're miserable. By subsiding, we'll be happy. He wants us to be happy. So our only duty is to be happy. In the days of, in Bhagavan's days, his brother was Chinnaswami, was managing the ashram, and whenever you get two people together, politics starts. When you've got a big group of people together, there'll be lots of politics. So everyone had different ideas about how the ashram should be run. Some people had an idea, whatever donations are given should be used for buying land, and if we buy land, we can cultivate paddy and we can feed all the devotees who come here. But Chinnaswami had an ambition. He was very devoted to his mother. So he had this strong ambition to build this temple for his mother. And so in spite of all the opposition and everything, he was determined to build this temple. And because Bhagavan's present there, the money was flowing in, but there were always difficulties. Bhagavan will always give us enough. He'll never give us too much. So there were always difficulties. Chinnaswami was often having a lot of difficulties. There'll be difficulties with the workers. There'll be difficulties with the other devotees who are objecting. There won't be enough money. It'll seem there's not enough money coming in. And he's got to pay the workers at the end of the day, and he's run out of money, and so many problems he was facing. He was terrified of Bhagavan. When Sadhuam first came to Bhagavan, Chinnaswami called him aside and said, he referred to Bhagavan as Adu. Adu means that. He said, be careful of that. It is fire. It is fire. So he was so terrified of Bhagavan. So whenever he had any difficulties, he would be afraid to go and tell his difficulties to Bhagavan. So he would always send someone on his behalf. So one time when he was having a lot of difficulties, he sent someone to Bhagavan to tell all his difficulties. But he had, though he was terrified of Bhagavan, he also had great Bhaya Bhakti. That is, he had his own form of bhakti for Bhagavan, but though he was terrified of him, so he believed firmly that if all his troubles were told to Bhagavan, by Bhagavan's grace they'll be removed. So he sent someone to go and tell all his troubles. So this person came and told Bhagavan, Chinnaswami asked me to say this problem, and he was listing all the problems, and Bhagavan was patiently listening. And Bhagavan referred to Chinnaswami as Pitchan. That was his sort of pet name in the family. So he said, tell Pitchan, let the temple be built or let the temple not be built. Let money come or let money not come. Let anything happen. He has only one duty, and that is to retain his peace of mind. Through that, Bhagavan is giving a very, very great teaching to all of us. Nothing matters in this life. But it's all anyway going to go on according to the way it's destined. We have only one duty, to be happy. That's why Bhagavan said, why should we carry the burden on our head? When we're traveling on the train, knowing the train is carrying all the burden, why should we carry our little luggage on our head and suffer? Instead of putting it aside and traveling at ease. The exact words he says is Ain kashta padabendam. That means, why should we suffer by carrying it on our head? Instead of sukhamaya ramam. That means, instead of just being happy, why should we suffer by carrying it on our head? So why should we think, all that is happening in this world, it's all, whatever is, we feel, I have responsibility, I've got family, I've got people who are dependent on me, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Bhagavan said, why should we think we have to do, it's necessary to do this, it's necessary to do that? Leave it all to God. Everything is being taken care of. If we leave it, we can then be happy. We suffer unnecessarily. Whatever great calamities happen in our life, we don't have to suffer. Why we suffer? Because of our likes and dislikes. If we were free from likes and dislikes, nobody could cause us suffering in any way. Even if someone beats us or takes away all our money and everything, if we have no likes and dislikes, we're indifferent to it. All suffering is caused only by our likes and dislikes. That is why Bhagavan says likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. So Bhagavan wants us to give up all our desires, all our likes, all our fears, all our hopes. But how can we do so? In order to do so, whose desires are they? They are ego's desires. So without giving up ego, we can lessen our desires, weaken our attachments, but we cannot give them up entirely without giving up this ego. That is why, ultimately, to really travel in the train at ease, taking off the luggage means including the ego. We have to give up this ego. Yes.
In a situation where somebody has given up the ego,
yes,
their will is so strong that it has actually happened, they have a family, what would be the prarabdha in the sense of it is God's will?
So when you say someone has given up ego, who is that someone? You mean a person?
A person. A person has...
A person doesn't have an ego. Ego has a person. It is the ego that says, I am this person. When ego is given up, then we are no longer a person. As Bhagavan says, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So in the absence of ego, in the absence of a perceiver, how can there be anything perceived? So where is the family? We all have a confused idea, because we consider Bhagavan to be a jnani. Bhagavan says, I am not this body, but in our view, Bhagavan seems to be that body. This picture is a picture of Bhagavan. This seems to be Bhagavan. This person who lived for 54 years in Tiruvannamalai seems to be Bhagavan. But he seems to be a person only in our view. He said, I am not this body. I'm not even, he didn't say directly, but indirectly he said in one verse in Bandham, the jnani is like a person sleeping in a cart. He's sleeping in the body, unaware of its actions. If you're sleeping in a cart, in a bullock cart, you don't know whether the bullocks are moving, or whether the bullocks are standing still, or whether the bullocks have been unyoked. But you're sleeping happily, you know nothing about it. Likewise, the jnani knows nothing about the actions of the body. That is, it's only in our view that Bhagavan seems to be a person. But we imagine one day I'm going to get self-realized, and after I get realized, how will I look after my family? How will I do this? And we think so many things. Chadwick, when he came to Bhagavan, he thought he would stay with Bhagavan until he gets self-realized, and then he can come back to England. He never came back to England. Because if you, we don't know whether he got self-realized. It's all according to Prarabdha. I mean, whether the body is in England or in Tiruvannamalai is according to Prarabdha. But when what is called self-realization, it's not I, Michael, will never be self-realized. Michael cannot be self-realized, because so long as I think I'm Michael, that is self-ignorance, that's ajnana. In order to self-realization means when this ego that rises and says I am Michael, when that is dissolved and found to be ever non-existent, not only is it destroyed, it is found that it never actually existed at all. So where's the question of Michael being self-realized? People ask me, are you self-realized? If I say I am self-realized, that's ego. Even if I say I'm not self-realized, that's also ego. That's why Bhagavan says in Ulunaptu, to say I have known myself or I have not known myself, both are grounds for ridicule. But it's better to be ridiculed for being humble than to be ridiculed for being proud.
Thank you.